Welcome to Season 3 of the Builders Podcast. I'm Matt Levenhagen. Here we share the journeys, strategies, and lessons that help entrepreneurs build what's next. Builders helping builders. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another The Builders. Today, it is a solo episode. I'm going to be talking to you about a bunch of stuff, if I can talk. And this is actually the third take. I usually don't do that. Usually I just dive right in and I'm good to go. But today, for some reason, my brain is taking a little while to get in the mode. But anyway, so this is actually going to be a really interesting one because I actually decided to include at the end an actionable thing for you to do. And that I think is useful. You can choose to do it or not do it, of course. But I'm going to use an example of how I'm using it and doing this particular thing and how it's helping me in my business and life. But before we get into that and what kind of leads into this whole thing, I will talk about a little bit about we have a season 4 coming up. Now, one of the things that with this podcast is that we didn't have seasons until like 201, I think. Maybe it was 200 or 201. We had our second season or first next season. And because I was inspired to finally like kind of change and tweak the theme of what we're doing or refine it. Well, this last season, season 3, has been all about builders helping builders. That was the goal and the inspiration, and that worked out really well. I refined kind of how things were structured a little bit more. You'll have noticed in season 3 that we have more part 2s where we have somebody come on and just talk about their story, and then they come back to talk about what they do. That's sort of going to continue, but what I'm going to be doing is enforcing a little bit more upfront that somebody, when they come on to the builders, that they're willing to talk about their story. Because one of the things, if you have been following this podcast for a while, you'll notice is oftentimes I'm really much more interested in the story arc and how that person was built rather than the actual tactics and things they're talking about. I mean, there's some great frameworks and tactics and things that people are doing out in the world, from AI to, other coaching type thing, whatever. But I've always had this kind of fascination with humans, understanding how people tick, like why did you do the things you're doing? Why are you doing the thing you're doing today? What led up to that? What happened in your business, in your life? What influences, what tragic thing happened? It could be anything. Like, what made that person that I'm talking to do the things they're doing? And I had some recent episodes, and one in particular, where we really got into their personal story and got real personal. But to understand what they're doing today, it was almost necessary to go there. It really filled in a lot of blanks, and you started to really understand the psychology of this person, why they are the way they are, and how they got out of a situation where a lot of people find it difficult to get out of. What was different with this person than it is for other people that don't get out of bad situations? Those kind of things I really am fascinated with. And even when that person might want to, start going into like some kind of tactical thing or thing they're doing, I'm like, yeah, but why did you make that decision? What made you think that way? That's what I really like to do. And I thought, well, let me try this. This is actually a great idea for another theme for another season. And therefore, season 4 is born. It might be a few weeks. It's going to be probably 2, 3, 4 weeks when that first episode lands. And from that point forward, you could probably expect more story. And that's going to actually filter out a few people, because one of the interesting things I've learned over the years, and I've been doing this podcast for 5.5 years, every week for 5.5 years. I have not missed a week. But one of the things I've learned is that not everybody has a story or has a story they want to tell. And one of the things And it's fine. It's been fine. Some people, we just decide, okay, you're going to tell your story for 10 minutes, and then we're going to get into the weeds of what you do and, how you're helping the world, right? In some way, shape, or form. And that's fine. But I really love the stories that, 30 minutes, or we don't even have enough time to get into everything about their story. That's so twisty and winding all over the place. And the average entrepreneurial story, which is like a complete mess. But there's a through line. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Like what are the patterns? What made, when you sit back and you look at the full arc, you start to kind of understand it a little bit. And that person might even learn something about themselves in that process. And we'll learn something about them in that process. But not everybody wants to tell that story, has that story. So that may filter out a few people that normally I would have had on. It's not like we're going to still have episodes. I'm probably going to still do the kind of 2-part episodes, or they'll spend most of the time talking about their story. I think this could change. It always does. Anytime I have an idea, when we get into the actual season, it tweaks and changes. But my thought process right now, if somebody has at least, is willing to spend 30 minutes on their story, and that could be very personal, or it could be more into their, career story or their business story and that the various businesses they've been in. And then we maybe land on what they're doing, and they can provide some takeaways, and we can learn from that. We learn from the story. There's always lessons within the story as well. So that's always awesome. That's kind of a bonus to all that. But also we might land on that, or we'll just, land on, which has been kind of the theme of season 3, is where we tell the story and I guide them and land the ship on what they're doing today. And that's what I'm doing during the whole episode. I'm like, okay, let's spend a little bit of time here. We know we need to get here. That's my role as the host, to get us to that point. And then we land on that point, say, next time you're going to come back and we're going to talk about your framework. We're talking about what you do. We're talking about your business more, about what you're doing today. And that's fun. And because we're still going to do that. But I always want to be able to point to their story. And I do that now. Like I said, I've been kind of doing that all this time. I always say, if you want to go, learn more about their story, go back to X episode, whatever. But now it'll be for sure. You'll be able to learn, and I like it too, because I get to know the person a lot deeper. And I feel like I get a better connection with that person, knowing more about them. Sometimes there's people on that, they just want to talk about what they do, and that's fine. But okay, enough of that. So, but the key is to really learn more about what, the person behind the building and who they are and how they were built. So that's going to be the goal. Now, to kind of illustrate this, and I want to take this opportunity. Now, I do, through these solo episodes, talk a lot about what I do and my history, and that's the idea, right? We're stories from the trenches. So if I'm the only one here, whose story am I going to talk about? Probably my story. And I have a rich story, like a long story of a lot of different things that I've done over the decades. Understand that I'm 55 years old. I have been there, done that at this point. I was running businesses back in the 90s, a variety of businesses, a couple. And but then more and more and other ones over the years. And we're going to get into that a little bit, my kind of story and kind of how I pulled what that's done for me. And I have been analyzing, so I may have talked about this in previous episodes, but back in the day, back in those days and over my life, periodically here and there, I've done journaling. And that journaling and notes I've taken and all that, I've kind of gone back and kind of unearthed all of that. And it's been an interesting process. Going back to revisit your former self from 35 years ago or 30 years ago or even 20 years ago, it's like, oh, who's that guy? You won't realize how much you've changed or what you've forgotten in that time frame. That's a long time. That's a whole life, right? And And that's why I also encourage, I've talked about journaling and stuff, really spend the time to journal if you can, because I wish I would have journaled more now that I look back. Because the years I did journal, I wish, and I did audio journals and written, I wish I would have done more. Because there's gaps, right? Like if I would have just, even just once a month or every few months, sat down and kind of did a recap what's going on in my life, it would have been really cool. So I wish I would have done it more. So I encourage that. But going back and looking at all that stuff and trying to figure out what built me, right? So like, why am I the way I am? And I think we're all kind of can be on that journey of self-discovery, of, understanding ourselves. And I think that's important because we forget. If we don't think about it, if you don't take the time to look at your life, you're going to lose the thread. Like, are you even really doing what what about those dreams you had 20, 30 years ago? Maybe you can find a way to reignite that spark or merge it somehow. And again, I've talked about my artistic journey a little bit and how I've kind of brought that back into my life again, on the side, alongside what I'm doing here, and with my business. But yeah, looking at my own story and figuring out the patterns and all this stuff, it's really, I've been analyzing it, and I've been using AI, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But I have a robust AI system I've been working on for I don't know about almost a year, probably almost a year. I really started thinking about it and been building it pretty heavily for the last 6 to 8 months. And it's both kind of a mixture of business and personal, like stuff that I'm doing with AI, databases and timelines. I'm literally reconstructing the timeline of my life. I can now say to my AI, what was I doing? What was my life like in 1993? And my system can bring up and tell that story in a story format. Like, this is the music I was listening to. This was the era. These are the people I lived with, because I had a lot of roommates in the 90s. I lived in a lot of places, had a lot of different roommates, people coming and going. It's a whole thing. But I can tell specifically that year, and then what job I had or what I was trying to accomplish and what I was struggling with, and I'm able to do that. I love it. That, like I said, that's a whole nother thing. But what I want to do here is I want to kind of reconstruct just briefly, like my sales arc of sorts. I'm not going to get into the artist side of things, because alongside, I had the artist identity in the early 90s. I was actually trying to be an artist, but I was doing all these other things to make money. So as an artist, it's difficult, and it's difficult today, but it was very difficult in the early 90s to be a self-taught artist, that was my route that I chose. And I made it. I got to a point, I had an art business, and I did run my own art shows and did commission work, and I did stuff, right? But while I was doing that, I was bartending and also trying sales and doing all kinds of other things in there. But here's the interesting thing. So forget the artist for a minute. So let's talk to the Matt that was trying to make money. I was trying to make money with art, and I made some, but I was hunting for something to do on the side. And I really, as my main thing, but I really gravitated to sales. I thought, now I had only gone to college for a semester, and I dropped out because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I had to figure out what I was going to do. And that's why I ended up going the route of art, and then eventually went back to school, which we'll get to. But in the early days, like, I thought sales would be something I could do. I'm a smart guy, I thought, at 19 years old. And back in 91, I worked at Kirby Vacuum Cleaners for a couple months trying to sell. I sold one vacuum cleaner to my grandma, I think. She was very nice. She felt sorry for me, probably. But, and then Encyclopedia Britannica for 6 months. And understand that when you do these things, just like the other jobs I had at that time, I worked at Pizzeria Uno's. I worked at the Olive Garden. Opened 2 stores. Each was opening a new store in the Milwaukee area. And I went through all that training. But it's the same with sales. You go through all the training, you try to sell, didn't work out. But you had all that training. And I'm reading Zig Ziglar, I'm reading whatever sales books I can find and try to become a good salesperson. And that didn't really work out for me at that stage of my life. And, but then, after that, so I ended up doing bartending. So I bartended like full time for like 5 years in my 20s. And, 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 and I learned a lot from that as well. But within that, I'm trying other sales jobs along the way. I probably had at least half a dozen other sales jobs off and on. I'd try different things and no, they never would really work out. But I still had sales on the brain. I just felt, I'm like, I want to be able to put in the effort and get out what I put in. I don't want ceilings. I want to, well, there's still a ceiling because you can only put in so many hours. But the bartending was a stability during that time, but I was doing these things on the side, right? And did a variety of things. But during that time, I'm learning, right? I'm learning from each thing, each sales job. I'm learning something. I'm getting better, maybe, or at least you're collecting these skills. And so I'm learning about rejection, learning about communication and persistence and the numbers game and all of that stuff. I didn't actually learn really, the numbers game came in the early 2000s. That's a whole story. And then I went back to school. So 1996, fall of 1996, I went back to school for business. I decided for reasons, and I went back to school for business, was in business for a year and a half, or not in business, in school for a year and a half. And why it was only a year and a half is because a year after I went back to schools, there was this guy that was actually a friend that I had made while bartending. He was a patron at my bar, but I got to know him, right? As I did many people. I made a lot of friends in the bar business. But he owned an insurance agency. And one day he knew that I wanted to get out of bartending. I was, by that time, 5 years in, like, I don't want to bartend anymore. There was actually a time I'm like, maybe I'll own my own bar someday. And a few years in, I'm like, no, that's definitely not what I want to do. But he owned an insurance agency. And one day we were talking and he's like, hey, you want to come work for me? Want to be an insurance agent? It would be really cool. I don't know how the conversation exactly went, but I ended up getting my insurance licenses. I went to do that, get licensed, and I started working for him around July of 97. And I still bartended part-time for a number of years, but, insurance was my main gig. I started wearing a tie, all that good stuff. And I started as Allstate. And we were an Allstate agency for the first 6 months. We figured out we liked working together. And we decided, it was kind of his idea, probably was just along for the ride, but decided to open an independent agency. And so we could sell hundreds of different companies and branch out and do a whole lot more commercial insurance, everything else. And so that was a whole thing. And so when that opportunity came along, I'm like, I don't need school anymore. I'm going to just go do this thing. Kind of like a lot of entrepreneurs do when, they drop out of school and they go chase this dream or this opportunity. And I did that. But I learned, so we were doing that. And then, but during this time, all that sales training suddenly gelled. And I actually was a pretty good insurance agent. And we kept going. I did that with him for about 4 years. We built this agency from the ground up, and then one day, so during that time, I'm learning how to, I'm learning more about relationships and trust and how to communicate and what reoccurring income revenue is like, and how to prospect and call leads, and so many things I learned in that business, and I would learn just by studying him. I would just sit at the door and listen to him and how he operated. And I learned so much from that. And, but then there was a point where I stopped bartending and I started a little business on the side called Matt's Painting and Repair, a little home repair business. And I started to do a little remodeling eventually, but I started doing that on the side and it took off. And it took off because I put a little ad in the newspaper here in Milwaukee I put an ad in the newspaper and it did awesome. This little ad I had in there, I had for a couple of years. I just put that ad in and I would be 3-4 months deep in business, and I would take it out because I didn't need any more business, and I'd put it back in when I needed more business. Well, I eventually left because it was doing so well. I left insurance because I was kind of burned down on that for reasons as well, and then I pursued that. But I wanted to see where I could do with that, and so I was estimating, and I built a team. I had a crew of like 4 painters and a carpenter. And we went out on job sites every day, and we were just doing stuff. And I ended up with partnerships and did all kinds of. So that was a couple of years, and then something happened where that kind of blew up. And I'm not going to get in every detail, but there's stories within stories. And then from there, I went back to insurance, and I actually started my own agency, Levenhagen Insurance Agency. Got my own contracts, partnered with another agency in town to be able to sell more. Did a bunch of stuff, did that for a couple of years. But during that time, I built a website for Levenhagen Insurance Agency, and that website introduced me to affiliate marketing and internet marketing. You see how all this, like this, I am learning sales through the 90s and business and marketing. And then I'm running my own business and really learning the skills of how to run your own business. And then an insurance agency. I'm an insurance agent with my own insurance agency. And then that all leads up to the internet. And I figured out how to make money on the internet. And insurance was kind of like, I'm a creative person. I'm not, I think I learned, like, a decade doing insurance was enough. I can be a nerd and I can be, like sales guy, but I think at that point I saw the opportunity to be much more creative and do some really cool things online. And I ended up doing that, right? I did digital products. I did affiliate marketing and pay-per-click advertising. I built that whole business and all that. But even there, now I'm learning how to translate all the stuff that I learned in business in the analog world, in the world of the physical world, to the internet. You remember that ad that I put in the newspaper? Suddenly I'm putting digital ads in a little search engine called Google AdWords, and learning how to write ads. And because I already kind of wrote ads, right? I had a little bit about, that's what translates. So there's that through line. And now I'm doing internet marketing. Like, how did I get from insurance to, there's a through line. Like I'm always looking for opportunities and leveraging the next thing and trying to get to the next thing. And so that's where that came from. And man, then we land on web development, right? And web development, the reason why that happened is because the things that we were doing in that time, I would have kept going with internet marketing and what I was doing, but industries changed, the landscape changed, merchants changed, rules changed, and the things that we were doing in the beginning didn't work as well. I tried to pivot to different things, and in other types of opportunities until one day I was like, you know what? I'm kind of burned out at this. I'm tired of fighting Google. What else do I like to do now? And I look back, and I didn't go all the way back. I could have went back to insurance or something. But I look back, I'm like, you know what I really liked over that time? I really loved building websites, building members areas. I had thousands of members, and I sold thousands of digital products. I loved that. I loved tinkering and building sales pages. I liked it. I would like spend hours and hours just doing that stuff for my own promotions. Now, what if I could do it for somebody else? And that's where I turned into a freelancer, which turned into working for a corporation for 3.5 years as their web developer and building teams there, learning out more about teams. And then eventually in end of 2018, early 2019, I started Unified Web Design. And the rest is history. Almost 8 years later, I'm still doing it. But you can see that through line, right? You can see from that guy that was trying to sell Kirby vacuum cleaners all the way to the guy that, it all gelled. I kept trying sales. And then suddenly I was probably 26 when I got into insurance. So in my late 20s, I'm an insurance agent. And all that through line to internet marketing to what I do today, now running an agency and all that knowledge, I can work with businesses. I can talk to marketing teams and sales teams and understand and translate their vision. And because I've been there, done that, right? And the creative part of it, like from artists, there's a through line there too. There's another kind of sub through line. That creativity melded into all kinds of other things that I did. The creativity of web design, creativity of just promotions and just creative promotions and all this stuff. I mean, it's there. So it all fits together and makes sense. This whole thing I've been doing for months and months and months now, and working with my AI to kind of analyze it, figure out, even feeding it all my journals and talking to that, like, who is this guy? I really have a really deep understanding of myself. So that's why I'm going to, at this point, I want to kind of throw it to you as kind of a challenge, something that I think many people could benefit from, because I think so many just walk, through their lives and all that stuff that happened back then, or, you repeat a lot of your same mistakes, and that could be a benefit, is like identifying those patterns so you don't continue them. Kind of like that pattern of me quitting jobs. I would quit jobs on the drop of a hat. Somebody's having a party, I couldn't get off. I'll go to the party. That did happen maybe once or twice. Friends were important, having fun at that stage of my life. But I learned, right? That was a pattern. And I identified that pattern and I fixed it, even back then in that smaller time frame. But you see that. So I would challenge anybody like listening to this, if you're, sit down it doesn't have to take you long. You don't have to do what I'm doing, like literally reconstruct timelines of like your locations, who you're with, friends and jobs and businesses, and what you listen to for music. I'm doing everything. Books. It's a whole thing, but you don't have to do that. But just looking back, kind of sketch your timeline. You may not have as chaotic and maybe you've not even been on this earth as long as I have, but look at, break it down, like the different eras of your life, whether that's decades or years, groups of years, just jobs, businesses you've had or whatever, and sketch out your timeline. Now, this isn't like a resume or anything. You're not like, you don't have to go there, right? Just like narratively, like just bullets actually really helped me, because I actually, I've always been kind of like, I would document my life through time, especially time frames where I knew a lot was changing and happening. But there was a few times that I actually, and I was able to find these scraps of paper where I wrote down like timelines of where I lived and where I worked, like in the years. I actually wrote it down. That really helped me reconstruct my timeline. But just bullets and, kind of estimates. Doesn't have to be perfect. Honest. It doesn't really matter that I did X, Y, Z in 94 versus 93, right? But it gives you an idea of a general idea of what you were doing. And, but to figure like jobs, maybe you jot down some failures you had, what you were going through, detours, obsessions, relationships, businesses, skills, whatever you think, kind of defines that era. And then ask, what built me? What are the common threads there? And how does that inform like how I show up today? Am I, if you see yourself, you did something 2 or 3 times, you found yourself in a problem area 2 or 3 times, maybe it's time to focus on that problem area and see if you can put things in place that can prevent those mistakes or whatever. Or maybe it's something you identify, you realize you do have this kind of creative through line, like, or you wanted, when you started life, your adult life, You wanted to be, just using me as an example, you wanted to be an artist, right? But you realize that life is going to present differently than you thought. And you ended up doing other things, but maybe you can bring some of that back. Or maybe, or maybe you just see that through line like I do. Like there was multiple points in my life where art sprouted back up again for a while and then went back down because of life. And even did digital art for a few years. I did, in 2001, I had this, like, I have journals and sketches and notebooks full of stuff because I had a little bit of spark. I was going to maybe bring it back at that point. And, but all of this, through all that, by looking at that and analyzing, looking at your life, number one, it's just cool. It's just cool kind of thinking about the old days and the old stories. That's the thing. You can take this as far as you want. You can take, an hour, or you can take, maybe it'll become this thing you have in a notebook or a digital notebook or however you want to do it. And you kind of fill it in. You keep putting those memories in, and you can have a lot of fun with it. If you then take that and put it in a chat GPT or whatever, your favorite LLM, and you put it in there as a project, and then you start speaking to the AI about it. That's actually a really cool thing. I would really recommend doing something like that. Circling all the way back to The Builders and season 4. And even up till now, because we're always talking stories, and stories have always been a part of what we're doing, is that when you're listening to somebody else's story and you listen to their arc and their lessons from that and how they went, that might help inspire you in the moment. Maybe it's something you're doing right now and might inspire you, but it might also help you understand your journey more through them, kind of see pieces of your own journey and who you are and recognize patterns. And maybe that person figured out how to navigate it, and that'll inform you how to navigate it. So we're going to figure out how builders built themselves, and then maybe you'll figure out along the way how you built yourself and how you can be a better person today. All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Until next time. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Builders Podcast. One more quick note about our sponsors. At Unified Web Design, we're passionate about doing better together, partnering with agencies and businesses to deliver exceptional web design, development, and ongoing support. And UnifiedLabs.ai is where we explore smart, practical ways to integrate AI directly into your website and e-commerce flows. From intelligent chatbots to marketing automation to back-end reporting, all with a strong focus on user experience and making your systems work smarter. If you haven't already, subscribe or follow to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, sharing it with someone who might benefit helps us grow this amazing community. Until next time, keep building smarter, bolder, and with purpose.